Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas of Stunning Digital Marketing. Today I sit down with my good friend AJ Morris and we talk about Ithemes and where Ithemes is going and the roadmap. And we also talk about the Restrict Content Pro buy. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast with AJ and I. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm here with my good friend AJ Morris. He's in charge of product development and marketing over at Ithemes. And AJ and I have known each other a long time. How are you today, AJ?
Good, Rob. How are you?
Not too bad. We were just saying before we went to record, it's been a long time. I think the first time we met in person was like 2011 in Toronto, and we've kind of stayed in touch off and on over the years. And it's been a long time coming. So, yeah. So I'm going to jump right in. What is your role at Ithemes and what are you doing for Ithemes right now?
Sure. So I am kind of a hybrid role. I'm a product innovation and marketing manager, which is a weird title, but really what it boils down to is that I lead our product strategy and our marketing strategy. So all of our products, Backup Buddy, Itheme Security, Sync Pro, our new Restrict Content Pro that we just acquired. I really lead kind of all the feature efforts that go into that. So where are we going? Where are we going to play in the marketplace? And really working with teams internally to identify and put out good releases for those. And then on the other side, the marketing side, I take a look at, what strategies are we using? Where do we put those together? And putting together different campaigns and plans and partnerships with other potential WordPress developers to put together marketing strategies to market and sell our products.
And that's absolutely awesome. And, I think Ithemes still has a big place in the market. They always have. I know from a usability standpoint, the three products I'm kind of in with is Backup Buddy. Backup Buddy's been a long time, and I think today is probably more stable now than ever before. In terms of Itheme Security, that's part of my security stack. I tend to lean towards it or WordFence, depending on what I'm doing. So I'll tell you that. And then the buy of Restrict Content Pro, which I think caught some people in the WordPress community and some of the groups I'm in a little bit off guard. We were talking before we went to record. It didn't catch me off guard. How did that kind of play out? Did it play out over a couple months, 6 months? Can you share a little bit about what happened?
Yeah. I think I want to say it was on the Sandhills dev post. Pippin had kind of mentioned it was something that we had been talking about internally, reached out to Pippin and just said, hey, is this something that would be of interest to you? Matt Danner, my boss, the general manager at Ithemes, he kind of did that and reached out and had a number of conversations. And that led to, us acquiring it, kind of the beginning of September. And, we had been part of a number of conversations kind of leading up to that September announcement. So it was a good thing. They are seeing a lot of growth in some of their other products. They weren't seeing, they were actually seeing a lot of growth in Restrict Content Pro as well. They always look for, what their team is meshing well with. And we were looking for kind of a front-facing product, something that wasn't so utility driven. We just, after having those conversations, it really just meshed well. And, we're here today, about 28 days into the official acquisition. And, we're looking full steam ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a good acquisition. I use it actually quite a bit on some sites I've done just to restrict pages where you don't need that full membership plugin, but I think you can use it in lieu of a membership plugin. I think it works really well. So good on you guys on acquiring that one. Like really, I wasn't surprised, because I think we're at a point where anybody who knows iThemes knows the staples are Backup Buddy, Itheme Security, Itheme Sync, right? Those are really the
Mm-hmm.
three big. You still have, correct me if I'm wrong, the iTheme Builder for websites, if it's still there. And I
Yep.
know you've been clawing back some of your legacy plugins finally and saying, we really need to think about what we do with these, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we have a training service, Ithemes Training, that we've run for close to 10, maybe even longer than 10 years at this point. And that, you know, we've had a lot of experience with memberships. I mean, when you think about even plugins, you know, you're purchasing a plugin that you will get updates to. That's one aspect of purchasing a plugin, but the other is access to support and being able to have somebody there to help support you when the product has a problem. And so in many ways, you know, iThemes has always been building memberships, whether it's our iThemes training product or our plugins, and offering support for those plugins. So, you know, for us, it was just a really good fit. It made sense. And, you know, some of the things that we're looking at doing, you know, here in the near term is relaunching iThemes Training with a better membership component, actually eating our own dog food and putting Restrict Content Pro into play there, where, you know, we had used kind of a custom build membership component to that WordPress site.
yeah, and training has always been a big part of what iThemes has done. The
Yeah.
other thing that's a big part of what you guys do, because of Itheme Security, is you have an amazing twice a month newsletter that comes out that wraps up all the security vulnerabilities. And that's kind of one of, because I'm in a care plan business, has been one of my go-to places
Oh,
for
yeah.
years to keep track of what's vulnerable, what's not vulnerable. And we're seeing a lot of interesting things in the security space right now, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah. You know, with everybody working at home these days, and just a lot of people getting online, you know, you're seeing a lot of people trying to take security a little bit more serious. They're trying to make sure that their websites aren't going to get hacked, and that you know, they're able to put in the right policies, the right you know, kind of safeguards to just really protect and keep everything up and running, and you know, not run into those issues.
Yeah. And I also think what people need to remember is, because everybody's working at home, so are all the script kiddies working at home who have nothing better to do, right? As you
Right.
laugh at me, right? So, you know,
Yeah.
I actually, one of the strategies I've used for years, having come out of a very heavy technical background, is anything I need security that I actually do, I do on a VPN. And I, believe it or not, at home, I do in a virtual machine. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw my post, but I've actually given up on Windows as of about a month and a half
Nice.
ago. I've gone all Linux based in my business.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
From a
Yeah,
security
awesome.
perspective. So
Yeah.
let's move on to Backup Buddy, because we
Okay.
all love Backup Buddy. And I find Backup Buddy is more stable today than it ever has been in a long time, just from a usability standpoint. Do you want to speak to Backup Buddy a little bit and what you've done?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I have a team behind me. I don't want to ever say that I'm one person. I've got several people that are working on the day-to-day product strategy, marketing strategies, and so I'm not ever one person here, and that's great to have a team. And part of that has really driven us to the person in charge of Backup Buddy, leading Backup Buddy, Kristen Wright. She has spent a lot of time really taking a look at our customers, what specific pain points they still have, and then working with our development team to try to, you know, get through those and solve those in a way that allows us to continue to have such a stable product. Now, you know, with Backup Buddy, you're always going to have a lot of history, right? It's the oldest product that we sell. That was really kind of the first product that's out there. So it's got a lot of cruff still, right? As we start to rewrite things, and just over let's see, 12 years of being in business. Backup Buddy is going to have a lot of historical code, and so a lot of that has to do with the team behind it, and really just making sure that while we do have some of that historical code, that code that maybe needs to be rewritten, we're putting in better layers each and every time that we do a release. And so you're starting to see that kind of come through, right? Dropbox isn't updating their APIs as much anymore. We've moved Backup Buddy Stash from Amazon web servers over to Liquid web servers, and so that's allowed us to kind of control a little bit better of that backup stack. Other APIs have grown into maturity, and so when you see products become mature, you see APIs become mature, I think you naturally get to see some of that stability increase. And so Backup Buddy for us has seen that. I know you were a longtime Backup Buddy user, and so I think it speaks well to this. Backup Buddy originally, it would always have issues with backups in shared hosting environments because the amount of hosts that are out there are just, they're a dime a dozen. And so we always saw issues in shared hosting. It was one of the reasons that we saw Backup Buddy Stash come to fruition and Stash Live, is that we were solving a problem that customers were having, which was in that shared hosting environment, you couldn't create backups, stable backups, right? They were getting hung up. They were, you had to configure WordPress. Yeah, you had to configure all sorts of stuff. And so we tried to solve that problem in the shared hosting space. And, as you look at hosting, the hosting industry in general has changed dramatically in 10 years. I think that's also helped kind of provide more stability to Backup Buddy.
Yeah, I just recently did a site for an insurance association, and there was over 250 documents on the site, which is kind of high. Wow. It was like all their minutes, and it was all because of firewalls in the insurance business. They put it all on a shared host in the media directory. Okay. And Backup Buddy had no issues moving that site from a test domain to a live domain. So, I mean, and I know going back 5 or 6 years ago, having been through all the pearls with Backup Buddy, if I tried to do that, with any product, I would have been yelling at myself in my sleep saying, what am I doing here? So the product has definitely become better and more stable. So, Itheme Sync. Did I see that there was some changes released to Itheme Sync recently? Do you want to talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, so most recently, I think within the last couple of months, the date escapes me exactly, we launched some integration with the Google Lighthouse service. So Google Lighthouse, for anybody unfamiliar with it, is like it's like page speed on steroids, right? It does page speed, so you can test the performance of your site. You can test accessibility, SEO, kind of codability almost. And so you can run those reports right within your sync dashboard once your site is synced. We're actually getting ready to do an update to that release, which allows you to include that in your client reports that Sync provides, so you can pass over the data that's relevant to your client through that client report.
That's really cool. I mean, I think integrating works really well. I think the part that caught my eye was all the accessibility changes. Accessibility is becoming a big issue in the U.S. right now with all the laws in place. There's all kinds of lawsuits running around. I think it's something that people need to be aware of sooner than later. So
absolutely.
That kind of helps. In terms of moving forward now, Ithemes is owned by Liquid Web, right? Has there been any discussion about coming up with a managed hosting from a liquid web perspective where we say, okay, here's your hosting. And by the way, here's all your Itheme stuff tied to that hosting. Has there been any discussion of that kicking around?
So I think there's kind of already that in some regards. So, Liquid Web / Nexus has, we've kind of moved in the hosting side. We've moved managed WordPress and managed WooCommerce hosting products over to the Nexus brand. Nexus is really that kind of managed apps brand. So they've got a managed Magento over there as well. And with managed WordPress and WooCommerce, you get Itheme Security. With managed WordPress, you also get sync. So you get access to the sync dashboard and you can connect all your sites there. Backups, backups is a tricky thing when you start looking at what a host can do versus what a plugin can do. And so, when you're a host and you own your own stack, you can really kind of control your backups. So they provide 30 days worth of backups included in that managed WordPress hosting side. On iThemes, though, we actually have our own hosting. It's not talked about as much. It's more geared towards, it's like a step up from a shared server. So there's still shared resources available. But when you purchase Ithemes hosting, you get Backup Buddy and security included with it. So that kind of solves that need of hosting with some core Ithemes products.
Yeah, I've always taken the approach with backups. If you have a good host, they'll do them for you. But I don't like having my eggs all in one basket. So we've seen companies have backup servers hacked. Two that come to mind was A2 Hosting in the UK. They were hacked. Their backup server was hacked a couple of years ago. And another one was Melbourne IT, which is Australia's biggest web host. Their backup server was hacked about 5 or 6 years ago. So we've seen this happen. And I always take the approach, and for years I've taken the approach that it's nice to host dozen, but you have to do them yourself because I don't like the eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also another thing to be said about, when your host does do the backups, however they're backing it up, if you needed to spin up a staging site or even a test site locally, it may be a little bit more complicated because it works for their system. And so using something like Backup Buddy, you can grab that zip file, you can use Import Buddy or the new restore feature in Backup Buddy to restore the site once you've got it up and running. And so that's something that we always do. I always have it set, and I throw most of my backups over to Amazon S3 still, and then I every couple of months I'll just dump them into the Glacier, which is like their deep freeze S3 storage, and so I've got backups upon backups there in that regard.
You've always been as anal on backups as I have been. So I mean, the big joke with me is what storage don't I have for that exact reason. I can go back on client sites on care plans and I can pull backups from 8 months ago. I pretty well keep 8 months to a year because we all know that sometimes if your site gets infected today, the infection could have been deployed 3 months ago. I've seen that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump over to security a little bit, because to it a little bit. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around today.
No worries.
Itheme Security, what are some best practices for security for people?
Well, I think the biggest one is not using admin as your login. That's kind of a gimme these days. With Itheme Security Pro specifically, there's a couple of features we really like, which is setting up some sort of multi-factor authentication, whether it's connecting something to your phone and having it work there, or one of the features I like is actually just sending an email link. So we have a feature called Passwordless Login that allows you to put in your email address or your username, click a link, and it sends you an email. You click on the link in the email and it'll log you into your site. So that gives you kind of a multi-factor authentication approach, because you do have to access your email to get that link. Things like, just properly going through the users that have access to your site, making sure that they have the appropriate permissions. Don't give somebody, admin role if they don't really need the admin role. Similar with author or editor roles. If you do any custom roles, that gets more advanced, and so you want to make sure you're keeping track of that. There's a lot of fake things like, should I hide my WP login or WP admin? Should I hide that? Those types of things. Yeah, they can kind of help, but the reality is that, an attacker that knows WordPress is going to know multiple ways around those things. So, that's what I look for. There's a lot of other features you can put in. You can put in reCAPTCHA, V2 or V3. So you've got a lot of flexibility there. We have really tried to become the security experts for WordPress users. So when you install WordPress, or when you install Itheme Security, there's a little button that says secure my site. And when you click on that, we kind of take all those best practices, activate them all, get them all set up for you, and then try to walk you through some of the things that we need user interaction on to help secure your site even more.
Yeah, and the two things. One, your complimentary product Backup Buddy, keep a regular backup. And the other thing, which the security products don't do, is keep your website up to date. Like, keep the plugins up to date, keep the themes up to date. Watch newsletters like the Ithemes newsletter to see what plugins have been impacted. There's vulnerabilities every day, and we've seen some real big ones lately, like big ones. And we just need to. The reality of it is WordPress is sitting right now at about 35% of the market to 40%, depending on who you talk to, right? And the problem is, if we're sitting at 40% of the market, frankly, I think what we need to do is realize that the bigger you become, the more of a target you become. And that's just the reality of it. I mean, everybody says it's because it's open source. I don't necessarily agree with that. If you go read the Joomla security newsletter or the Drupal ones, which I occasionally look at, they have the same problems because they're based on the same engine, right? So, and
that's the way that Mac was too, right? 10 years ago, Macs weren't as widely used as they are today. And I remember a time when I never had to worry about installing an antivirus software product on my Mac. Now here I am in 2020, and I need to have something installed just to be on the lookout for it. So yeah,
that's the way it goes. And unfortunately, the other thing with backups is, and I'm going to remind people of this because I come out of a bit of a corporate environment. Make sure you test your restore. Like, a lot of people will install something like Backup Buddy. They'll run backups for 6 months, and then they'll get stuck. And then they'll say, wait a minute here, my backup's not working. Take the time and test that to a subdomain or a test domain, or do something to make sure your backups are actually functioning before you need them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's a big issue like you wouldn't believe. So I wouldn't be, worried about that too much. So, and the other part is security. Frankly, a big part of security is your web host, and you guys are partnered with Liquid Web, and a good web host makes all the difference in your security stack, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your host is going to have a lot of server-side security settings already in place. And it really depends, right there. When you look at the hosting industry, there's shared hosting, which is common, whether you're at SiteGround or DreamHost, GoDaddy. They're going to have a lot of security in place because they're hosting so many accounts all the time. But when you go to something like a VPS, you may only have baseline security because you're managing some of that as well. So you really have to look at that host. When you're in the managed WordPress space, I can't think of an instance that comes to mind in the last year or so that has been a security issue related to a managed WordPress host. And I think that's just because when you start to say, hey, I'm only going to run WordPress on it, you can put in proper security settings and configurations on those servers to run WordPress really well, but also keep it really secure. And so, looking at a product like Itheme Security, that's going to take care of the application side of things, enforcing strong passwords, enforcing good password practices, right? Resetting your passwords regularly, keeping WordPress up to date, all the things that we've already mentioned. That's where you can kind of have that 1-2 punch with a good host and a good security plugin.
Yeah. And while we're talking about security, what is your take on WordPress's latest changes that let you to auto update plugins? Controversial topic.
It definitely is. It's an interesting one. So, having spent years as a developer, I will say I've really kind of gone with a process where you have a dot release. So you have 2 dots, so like 1.1.1 or 1.1.2. When you're in those 2 dot releases, they're typically just bug fixes, security issue fixes. It's not like sweeping changes in a plugin or in a theme. And so in essence, I believe that those should always work. You should be able to update those because you want to be secure and you want to have the bug fixes fixed. So in that regard, I think that the auto updates works great. But the way that WordPress took it is that they're going to auto update everything, and it doesn't matter how you plan your versioning. It's just going to see an update and it's going to update it. And that's where I think things can go off the rails. You can have a plugin like I'll pick on Beaver Builder. I know that they're much better than this, but Beaver Builder affects the front end of your website. And so if you have an update to it and WordPress sees it and just auto updates it, it could break your site, and you might not know about it for, short end, several minutes, or long term, several hours, or even a couple of days. I never want breaking sites, right? As running client sites, you never want to have a site be broken. And so you typically want to manage those updates yourself. And you and I have spoke a lot about this over the years. And so I think, WordPress, I always turn that feature off. Thankfully, they have that ability to keep it off. And I'm grateful for that. I do think that, WordPress, when I take a look at, why would they do something? Why would they enable something like that? I think there's a twofold approach. If I switch gears and look at it from their angle, one, they want to continue to, speak against and compete against people like Squarespace and Weebly and Wix and any other website builder out there. And so when you start to compete against those people, you want to give them the best experience possible. And part of that is making sure that those plugins and your themes are auto updated so that your end user doesn't have to manually go into something that they might not understand and update. The other side of that is that we've seen for many years, even WordPress core itself doesn't get updated when it's left in ordinary users' hands. And so, when it's left in ordinary users' hands, we're having to not be able to use some of the latest technologies or push forward enough because we have so many sites still running older things. And so I think, WordPress core can say, well, we can control this to a degree, so let's control it and try to help push everybody forward. Is that the right move? I don't know. I'm thankful that it doesn't affect me so much because I can put in what I need to. But, I can look at it from an end user and say, hey, I'd be pretty upset if all of a sudden these auto plugins or auto updates happened and my site was broke.
Yeah,
So,
I've taken the approach, having over 100 clients on security care plans, that I don't do auto updates. I typically
mhm.
do weekly updates unless a core release or a major vulnerability comes out. So if a core
Yeah.
release comes out, like typically the way I manage my clients is I do security updates typically on a Monday, and
Okay.
then
Mhm.
what I'll do is say WordPress dropped a fix on Wednesday. If it was stable, I'll probably put it in Thursday.
Yeah.
But I do them all manually. I don't like leaving stuff to chance, and I don't like plug-in updates and pray personally. We've seen too much over the years where a plugin goes in, it conflicts with something else, and what happens? And it's like
Yep.
bang, and then next thing you know, I'm firing off an FTP client to rename all my plugins to figure out which one is the
Right.
problem one.
Yep.
And 2 hours later, you
Yeah.
know,
So before I moved over to the iTheme side, I was at Liquid Web and I helped
yeah,
build the first two kind of iterations of our managed WordPress offering. And one of the things that we really set the bar for managed WordPress hosts out there was creating what we call our visual comparison tool. And what that does is really solve those problems for auto updates. So you can have auto updates turned on, and that's great. We actually turn them off on the managed WordPress side, and we do a couple of things. Every night we look at, this is part of the backup process. We'll do a backup, and then we take a look and we say, okay, what plugins need to be updated? And if there is, we grab a list, and then we will take a backup, move it off to what we have, like an internal server that runs,
yeah,
or an internal platform that runs. It spins up your site, and then it'll go through and it'll run the first plugin update. When it runs that first plugin update, it'll then check with the live site and with this new test site and see if there's any visual changes. What that does is it really tries to help solve the white screen of death issue that we would always see happen,
yeah,
and really just make sure, there's no sweeping changes that are going to affect your site visually, because that tends to be the issue. Is it's a visual change, and a visual change could be a breaking change, right? It's not just I went from green to red. It could be it repositioned some custom CSS that you had written for a slider, and now all of a sudden the slider's off and you see like two images of the slider. It
yeah,
detects all of that. And so what we do is this visual comparison tool will go through this list, and it'll do one plugin, one theme at a time. And if it can make a determination, which is like I want to say it's like a 95 or 98% of no changes. So 95 to 98%, there's no changes. It'll go ahead and do the update. If it can't detect at that level, then it'll say, nope, I couldn't do an update, and it'll email you the next morning to say, okay, I found these plugins and I wasn't able to update those because it didn't hit our limit. And that way you then know to go in and do that. I love this feature. It's one of my favorite features. I think WP Engine might have just came out with it recently. I forget if it's on WP Engine or Flywheel, but I know they just came out with it. So others are starting to kind of pick up, what we were seeing as a big issue, on the Liquid website.
yeah. And this is a reason, on the web host side, that we're seeing an increase, and I think it's pretty well been happening across the board on the cost of web hosts. I mean, people are not being what I call smart with their money, so they're looking at these hosts and saying, the costs are going up. But then you got to look at support costs, which coming from a support environment are horrendous. You got to look at
Mm-hmm.
all these value add features they're building in, and you got to look at what you're getting out of it at the end of the day. And as I said to somebody in a discussion the other day, if you can't afford proper hosting, like kind of why are you in business? I mean, really. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hosts are always trying to find new ways to help you, right? How
yeah,
can they innovate on hosting, and whether it's support or features or new value add capabilities? it's what do you need? You need a host. At the end of the day, in order to have your website up, you need a host. And so they're just looking at it and trying to say, okay, what are some other ancillary things that we can offer aside from hosting to help provide those tools for you.
Yeah. And it's funny because as we were saying, I offer care plan packages, and I actually have a list of about 8 or 9 hosts that I'll deal with, Liquid Web being one of those. And then I have a list of a whole pile of hosts that if you have your site on that host, you're moving it, or I'm not doing business with you. And I won't get into the ones just to be nice, but we all know who they are, so I'm not even
sure
have that discussion. Sure. What's down the horizon for iThemes and Liquid Web that you can share with us?
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on behind the scenes right now. Things, depending on when this is aired, might have already come to light. So that could be fun. We put together a really good roadmap on the iTheme side for really all of our products for the next 6 months to a year, and we're starting to make progress on those. And so you can expect to see a lot of new releases coming out. Backup Buddy's going to get a pretty big release early next year. Restrict Content Pro, we've got a lot of things that we want to work on, and so we're working on some of those right now. Looking at things like better Stripe integration. Let's see, there's even some things to make the creation of membership levels easier. And so we're trying to get out of some of the dev only features and also look at the end user with Restrict Content Pro. Security.
Any talk in Restrict Content Pro doing things like maybe Square integration or stuff like that? Have you guys looked at that?
Always a possibility. I think right now it's Restrict Content Pro's been an interesting thing in that the way that it had kind of has always maintained, they were maintaining a feature set across all of the payment gateways. And so that was limiting in some regards, right? If To Checkout, for example, only did these set of features, even though Stripe did 20 or 30 other things, they only implemented the few features that say To Checkout did. And so some of the things that we're starting to get into are looking at, okay, well, Stripe offers things like pay with Apple Pay or pay with Google Pay or Amazon Pay, or whatever other types of tools like that. We're looking and starting to say, okay, let's maybe change the approach to the way that payment gateways work, and build with the features in mind that each payment gateway has. So we could look at Square. Square, I think, is a little more difficult because it's really a POS system first, an online second. So that one becomes a different set of challenges that we'll have to work through. It does. Yeah. But I think for us, we're also looking at what other things do people sell as part of a membership, right? Are there digital products like ebooks or some sort of a downloadable file? Is there courses? Is someone selling a course as part of a membership site? And what does it look like to maybe sell one-off items as part of it? Right now, you would need Restrict Content Pro to manage the membership side and WooCommerce to manage the individual product side. But maybe there's a hybrid approach that we could take where Restrict Content Pro could be all of that for you. So we're exploring a lot of those options in that space, and really trying to look at creators that sell stuff online and what are those needs, and address those.
And that's
security is going to get some. Oh yeah,
that's a growing space. Sorry, AJ.
No.
So go ahead with security.
Yeah. So security, we're looking at. We spent last year. You mentioned the the approach to our newsletter that comes out twice a month about security vulnerabilities. That we've been doing, I want to say almost 2 years now, and it's or at least a year, but I think it's over a
Closer
year.
to 2.
Yeah, it's been a really good hit. It's our audience loves it, and what we did with that is we actually built that into Itheme Security Pro. So we've now got a new site scanner that will scan your site every day for known vulnerabilities, and we're always looking to improve that. So right now we were kind of in our phase 1, which was let's look at known vulnerabilities. Phase 2 starts to look at, well, is there JavaScript security issues that we need to make a site owner be aware of? Are there server settings that the owner might need to be aware of? And so we're starting to look at other phases of that site scanner work to really provide another way to help you stay secure. Sync's going to get some updates. Sync's getting a number of updates with the Lighthouse, as I mentioned. We've got a couple of other ideas there. I didn't mention Backup Buddy, and I guess I should kind of circle back to that one really quick and just say the updates that were happening there are really looking at the new user. A new user that installs Backup Buddy, what does that process look like to get connected with your remote destination? Where do you want to store your backups? And walking you through setting that up, walking you through setting up a backup plan. Every website's kind of a little different, and so we're going to take an approach in setting up backups to be more set up per site. So if you're setting up a blog, for example, we might ask some questions about how often do you blog, and that might help us kind of determine, what does your backup plan look like? Is it database backups? Is it full site backups? All of that kind of stuff. So we'll be doing a lot of updating in the Backup Buddy early next year as well. So a lot of updates, a lot of things going on. Ithemes is pretty separate from Liquid Web and Nexus, so I don't know what they've got going on over there. From the future side of things, what they're looking at, but I know they've got a lot of things in the works, and I think you'll be excited to see what they have coming out too.
Yeah, as a marketing manager, is it really tough these days marketing without WordCamps and things like that kicking around?
I would say yes and no. I think there's a community aspect that you get with WordCamps and going to as many that we have historically gone to over the years. But I think that there's also been a number of things that have kind of happened, right? There's a lot of online events that have taken place, and from an ROI perspective, it's hard to determine that. Where you can get a little bit better of an ROI determination with a WordCamp than you can, say, an online event. But I think an online event allows you for better analytical data. So there's kind of a give and take there. But from the community aspect, it's definitely a tough approach, right? How do you continue to be a part of a community that is now 100% online? And that I think is a challenge that we're all trying to take a look at.
Yeah, it's really a hard one. And a shift, I honestly don't think we'll go 100% back to the way it was. I know I've gotten to the point with online summits. I just have summit fatigue right now. Like being on Zoom calls, you have to be at your game at the top of it all the time. It's not like you can go to a WordCamp and then find 10 minutes to hide. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. The mid-afternoon, coffee break or go back to your room and just chill out for an hour. Yeah, you definitely miss that in the summits and being on Zoom and even being a remote worker, before COVID, Zoom is like my most used app app all the time. That's the way I communicate
Yeah.
with my team. And so the thought and the idea of sitting on a Zoom or sitting at my computer, all weekend for a WordCamp doesn't appeal to me. I've actually found myself having more fun this year by not traveling. I love to travel, but being not traveling as much and being at home with the family and being able to enjoy those weekends. It's been something I've enjoyed a little bit more than going off to a WordCamp. So, each person I think is different, and we're not going to see WordCamps even next year in 2021. So, I definitely think that from a marketing angle, we're going to have to look at what other things can we do. We've started experimenting with podcasts a little bit. We've got a couple podcasts we're sponsoring. And looking at what other things we can look to sponsor and just kind of get your name out there in the community. So
it's funny when you mention podcasts. Everybody would assume with the pandemic going on, podcast listening would be going down because people aren't commuting as much. Believe it or not, the numbers show exactly the opposite. They're actually going up. So I know when I work, I can't work in silence, so I almost always have a podcast on or something on. So
AJ, and I think people are doing a lot of walking right now too. I mean, at the early ages of the stay-at-home orders, I moved into a new subdivision last year, and didn't really get a chance to meet everybody or meet as many people. And one thing I noticed is that people weren't outside. Like, why do you have such a nice house, a nice yard, a nice HOA and all this, and you're not outside? And then all these stay-at-home orders hit, and you see just gobs of people walking out all throughout the day. And I think you start to see more people listening to podcasts. I know I listen to podcasts when I'm walking, when I'm mowing the lawn, snow blowing in the winter. Whatever it is, I'm usually listening to a podcast of some sort. So I'm not surprised by seeing the numbers go up, which I guess is a good thing. So,
yeah. AJ, thanks for joining me today. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, ask you some questions, how's the best way?
Yeah, well, thanks, Rob, for having me. Best way to get a hold of me, pretty much Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm AJ Morris on all the socials. You can email me at amorris@ithemes.com, or just even fill out the contact form and say, hey, you want to talk to AJ, and I will get it forwarded over to me. So, yeah.
Thanks a lot, and have yourself an amazing day.
All right. Thanks, Rob.